This video is to review the first learning objective for our course, which is to define terminology used in statistics. Specifically, we're going to talk about observational units and types of variables. I have a few example questions here that are similar to ones that you might see on an upcoming exam. The human resources manager of a software company is interested in how much overtime is worked by the 450 employees of the company. 40 employees are randomly selected and asked how many times in the last month they worked overtime and the length of overtime worked. Identify each of the following. First, an observational unit. An observational unit is a single person or object that is being observed or measured. So in this case, the observational unit, the individual that we are talking to find out the information we want, is an employee of the company. Variables are pieces of information that we are obtaining from the observational units. For this example, we are asking them how many times in the last month they worked overtime and the length of overtime worked. A discrete variable is one where there are just a finite number of possible responses. Or another way that you can think about it is a variable where you can list all of the possibilities without skipping any. So the number of times worked overtime So the number of times overtime was worked is an example of a discrete variable because they could have worked 0 times or 1 time or 2 times or up to however many days they worked in the last month, but you can't work half a time of overtime. So this is just you count the possible values that you could have. A continuous variable is one where there's an infinite number of possible responses. Generally, those are values that are measured, like the length of overtime worked. I like to think of this as values where you could go more and more decimal places if you had a really good measuring tool. So if you have a really good time measurer or clock, you can go more and more decimal places for the length of time overworked. Okay, let's look at another example. In a recent survey of 3,500 American households, the time that a household watches TV per day was recorded. Is length of time a household watches TV a discrete or continuous random variable? So length of time, as we already discussed in the previous example, is continuous. There are an infinite number or infinitely many possible values for length of time. And as I explained, another way to think about this is that we can go more and more decimal places when measuring length of time. If time is measured as number of hours a household watches TV, is it a discrete or continuous random variable? Well, number of hours now is discrete. There are only a finite number of possible values for number of hours. We're talking about hours per day. So you could watch 0 hours or 1 hour or 2 hours up to 24 hours. But since we're counting the number of hours, there are just a finite number of possible values. So we are counting the number of possibilities. And we can list all the possibilities without skipping any. As I said, 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. So another way to distinguish the difference between continuous and discrete random variables is that in a continuous random variable, we generally measure the value, and in a discrete random variable, we generally count the value. So hopefully that will help you understand the differences between observational units, variables, and specifically discrete and continuous variables.